I stared at my cell phone, feeling like my world was collapsing around me. The screen lit up with an image that pierced my heart like a dagger. There they were, my little sister Sarah and my fiancé Stephen, wrapped up in each other's arms, their faces glowing with happiness. The caption read, "Can't wait for our future together." Those simple words felt like a punch to my gut, knocking the wind out of me. My hands shook as I struggled to hold on to the phone. The walls of our home, once filled with love and warmth, now felt like they were closing in on me. Suddenly, the sound of the front door creaking open jolted me back to reality. Stephen walked in, his face brightened by the smile I once found so charming. Little did he know, an emotional storm was about to crash down on him. "Stephen," I began, my voice quivering but resolute as I held out my phone toward him. The accusing image glowed ominously between us. "What is this?" I demanded, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I watched as the smile faded from his face, replaced by shock and guilt. "Nancy, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered, his voice filled with tension and remorse. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Not what it looks like?" I repeated, disbelief dripping from every word. "You're embracing my sister, Stephen. What else could it possibly be?" He tried to explain, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes as he faced the determination in mine. "It was a mistake," he pleaded, "a moment of weakness. It was wrong." "A mistake?" I whispered, pain creeping into my voice. "You call betraying your fiancé with her own sister a mistake? Really?" As the initial shock began to fade, a wave of resolve washed over me. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. "It's over, Stephen," I declared, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "There won't be a wedding tomorrow." The next day brought another storm, telling my family what had happened. We sat in our spacious living room, the same room where we'd celebrated so many joyful occasions. Now it felt cold and foreign. My parents and Sarah listened in stunned silence, their faces a mix of disbelief and sorrow. "But Nancy," my father began, struggling to find the right words. "Sarah is still young. She's just a child, really. And as for Stephen, well, men will be men." I stared at my father in utter disbelief, unable to process what I was hearing. "Dad, are you really justifying their betrayals?" I asked, my voice rising. "Because Sarah is young and Stephen is a man? Have you forgotten who they are to me? Sarah is my sister and Stephen was my fiancé." My mother interjected, her voice soft yet firm. "Honey, we understand your pain," she said, "but Sarah has always been delicate, needing extra attention. We can't abandon her now." She continued, "About the wedding, everything's already paid for. Like your father said, men are just wired that way. It's in their DNA. You shouldn't let this affect you so much." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "I can't believe what I'm hearing," I said, bitterness seeping into my words. "Take care of Sarah, but what about me? Who's going to take care of my pain and my broken heart? Who's going to understand me?" The argument continued, with my parents trying to balance protecting their younger daughter while offering half-hearted support to their older one. Their words rang hollow in the emptiness of my shattered dreams. Days after the betrayal, I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions. Each morning, I woke up with a heavy heart, the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me like a lead blanket. It was as if they wanted me to be the glue holding our fractured family together, even at the cost of my own happiness. After that conversation with my parents, I knew I had to make a decision that would change everything. I had to step away from Sarah, Stephen, and the family that had betrayed me. I needed to rebuild my life, piece by piece, far from the pain that consumed my heart. In the following days, I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. My daily routine became a constant challenge to keep my composure. Even my work, which had once been my passion, now felt like an insufficient distraction from the thoughts that plagued me. I remember one afternoon, as I sorted through papers on my desk, when my phone vibrated with a call from my mother. I sighed, already anticipating the topic of conversation. As I answered, My mother began with a pleading tone, asking me to talk about Sarah. She said Sarah had been deeply affected by the incident and suggested it might be time for me to forgive her. I bit my lip, suppressing my irritation. I couldn't believe we were having this conversation again. I told her that Sarah had made her choices and I had made mine. Then came the bombshell. My mother revealed that Sarah was pregnant. She claimed it was a sign from God, a sign to keep the family together. She argued that I couldn't abandon Sarah at a time like this. I felt my voice quiver as I responded, asking why I had to be the one to fix things when Sarah hadn't thought about me when she decided to get involved with Stephen. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, and my mother's words stung as she reminded me that I had always been the strongest, that they were counting on me to keep the family together. She told me not to be selfish. I firmly replied that keeping the family together didn't mean accepting betrayal and pretending nothing had happened. I loved them all, but I couldn't do this. My mother sighed and urged me to think about the future, about the baby that was coming. The mention of the baby sent a fresh wave of pain through me. I wished the best for them, but I couldn't be involved in Sarah's life, not after what had happened. After hanging up, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I knew distancing myself from Sarah was the right decision for me, but the pain of rejection from my family still burned. I found myself questioning why I had to be the one to compromise, why my pain wasn't important. Staring at the empty room, I thought about how they kept talking about family, but where were they when I needed them? They wanted me to be the glue holding everything together, but at what cost? In the quiet of my living room, I let my mind wander, recalling memories of childhood and happy times with Sarah, promises made with Stephen. They all seemed like a distant past now. I whispered to myself, I'm not the same person anymore. This betrayal has changed everything. It's changed me. I knew I needed a fresh start, a chance to escape this small town filled with memories that had once brought me joy, but now felt painful. I craved a place where I could rediscover myself, a place where I could be free from the shadows that had been chasing me. I wanted a space where I could heal and rebuild my life on my own terms. With newfound determination, I made plans to leave, and within a week, I was gone. I was alone, but I felt resolved to walk this necessary path for my recovery and peace of mind. Years passed after I left my hometown, each year marked by struggles and personal growth. I found solace in my respected job and the independent life I was building in the big city. The memories of my past life and those who had hurt me still echoed in my heart, but with less frequency and intensity. One quiet Saturday morning, my solitude was interrupted by a rare call from my mother. My cell phone rang, and I answered it with a mix of hesitation and a sense of obligation. Mom, I thought to myself. She asked how I was doing, her voice cautious, as it always was during our infrequent conversations. I replied that I was fine, keeping our exchange brief and superficial as usual. She said she was managing, then hesitated before getting to the point of her call. It was about Sarah and her children. My heart clenched as she told me that Carol and Ryan had started asking questions about me. They had seen old photos and wanted to know who the other girl with their mom was. A pang hit my chest. I had never met Sarah's children. I asked Mom what she had told them, and she explained that she described their aunt as a loving, successful woman who lived far away and was very busy. But the kids were persistent, especially Carol, who seemed to have inherited my temperament, always asking questions and wanting to know more about the Aunt Nancy she never met. I took a deep breath, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. I told Mom honestly that I didn't know how to handle this information, unsure if I could open that door again. She spoke gently, saying she understood but wanted me to know that the children were innocent in all of this. Yes, they're innocent, I murmured thoughtfully. After hanging up, I sat staring into space, my mind racing. The idea of my sister and ex-fiancé as parents, with two little ones growing up with questions about me, was something I hadn't considered. I felt bewildered by the complexity of the situation. On one hand, there was the innocence of the children, On the other, the painful betrayal that still pulsed in my heart. After days of contemplation, I made a firm decision to continue moving forward without looking back. I had been focusing on my career and the new life I'd built for myself, and there was no reason to bring that old pain back into my life. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. I was at my office, buried in work, when my cell phone rang with an unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered with a simple hello. The voice that responded sent shivers down my spine. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years. My sister Sarah was on the other end of the line. I couldn't believe it. My hand trembled as I held the phone. "How dare you call me?" I said, my voice a mix of surprise and irritation. "Who gave you my number?" Sarah's voice was thin and hesitant as she explained that our mother had given her my number. I felt betrayed all over again. I had specifically asked Mom not to share my contact information. My heart raced as I curtly asked what she wanted. Then came the bombshell. Stephen had been in an accident. He was gone. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. Despite everything, the news hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. Sarah's voice cracked as she continued, telling me she was alone now, completely alone with the children. She didn't have money for food, let alone a funeral. She was begging for my help, her voice trembling as she cried openly. She sounded desperate, saying she wouldn't have called if it wasn't an emergency. Before I could process this information and respond, my phone beeped with another incoming call. It was our mother. Almost unconsciously, I ended the call with Sarah and answered Mom's call. Her voice was filled with anger and deep sadness as she asked if I'd heard about Stephen. She told me it was time to let go of my stubbornness. Her words hit me like a slap. "Stephen is dead, Nancy. It's time to kill that selfish pride of yours, too." I felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, and guilt all mixed together. "Mom, this isn't about stubbornness," I said, my voice tight. "This is about family." Mom's voice was full of accusation as she reminded me that my sister needed me now more than ever. She asked if I was really going to turn my back on Sarah and her children in their time of grief. I hung up the phone, feeling suffocated by the pressure and expectations. My sister's and mother's words mingled with painful memories from the past, Stephen's betrayal and death, Sarah's betrayal, and now the vulnerability of two innocent children. I faced a moral and emotional dilemma that felt impossible to navigate. I knew that helping Sarah and her children meant reopening old wounds, but ignoring their suffering didn't feel right either. I kept asking myself how much my own pain could justify refusing to help. Tormented by guilt and inner doubts, I made the decision to return to my hometown. With each mile I drove, I berated myself. "Am I being selfish?" I muttered, trying to justify my decision. "They're just children. They're innocent in all this." The familiar streets of my childhood felt like a journey through time, each turn stirring up memories I tried so hard to bury. When I arrived, I headed straight to my parents' house, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The reunion with Sarah was far from warm, no embraces, no tears of reconciliation, just a tense silence and averted gazes. Sarah showed no signs of remorse. Instead, she seemed to view my presence as some kind of victory. "So, you finally decided to show up," she said, her voice dripping with cold bitterness. "I thought your pride wouldn't allow it." I swallowed hard, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions wash over me. "I'm here for the children, Sarah," I managed to say. "They shouldn't suffer any more than they already have." "Oh, right, for the children," Sarah responded with a forced smile. "Well, since you're here, you can help with the funeral arrangements. It's the least you can do." The atmosphere in the house was suffocating, every conversation feeling like an emotional battle. Each glance from Sarah felt like a reminder of my pain and betrayal. During the funeral preparations, I observed my niece and nephew from a distance. Carol, the older one, seemed confused by all the commotion, while little Ryan played innocently, unaware of the gravity of the situation. Watching them, I felt a tightness in my chest, lamenting the circumstances they found themselves in. My interactions with Sarah during this time were strictly functional and cold. There was no room to discuss the past, only the necessary work to prepare for the funeral. Sarah maintained an attitude that I was merely fulfilling an obligation, showing no gratitude or recognition for my efforts. At night, I would lie down exhausted, torn between the relief of helping and the frustration of not being acknowledged. Sarah's indifference cut deep, like a knife twisting in an old wound. The day of Stephen's funeral arrived, a somber affair thick with a sense of loss, grief, and devastation. I observed from a distance, noting the small number of friends and family in attendance. The atmosphere was heavy, each face a mirror reflecting grief, shock, and, in some cases, hidden relief. During the funeral, I couldn't help but notice Carol and Ryan trying to make sense of what was happening. Their confused innocence was palpable as they looked around, clearly not fully grasping the somber purpose of this gathering. Carol clutched a small doll, while Ryan's eyes darted from face to face, seeking answers. A wave of sympathy washed over me for these innocent children. I knelt beside them and gently asked Carol and Ryan if they were okay. Carol looked up at me with big, curious eyes, her small voice uncertain as she asked why her daddy was in that box. I swallowed hard, struggling to find the right words a child could understand. As gently as I could, I explained that their daddy had gone to a place where he could rest forever, but that he'd always be watching over them. Ryan, too young to fully grasp the situation, clung to my leg for comfort. In that moment, Sarah approached, observing the scene with a complex expression. I could see a mix of grief and reluctant gratitude that I was there, comforting her children. The rest of the funeral passed in a blur of speeches, tears, and a sense of finality. What stayed with me were the confused, sad faces of Carol and Ryan and how Sarah's expression slowly changed, as if she was reconsidering our relationship. In the days following the funeral, I began to sense a noticeable shift in Sarah's attitude. Where there had once been coldness, system, and distance, now there were gestures of affection and attempts at closeness. It seemed Sarah was genuinely interested in rebuilding our relationship. One afternoon, as we sat in the garden watching the children play, Sarah opened up to me. She admitted to making many mistakes, saying she had been very immature. Now, with everything that had happened, she wanted to focus on her life, our relationship, and the children. I listened carefully, surprised by Sarah's candor. She continued, sighing as she revealed that Stephen hadn't been a good man. He drank too much and had been involved with other women. She confessed she had been blind to it all. Sarah's voice cracked as she told me Stephen had been drunk during the accident, crashing his car into a telephone pole, a lonely and foolish death. I felt a mix of pity and anger wash over me. That could have been me, I thought, considering how different my life might have been. Sarah looked at me with what seemed like newfound sincerity, saying she wanted to change for herself and for the children. She expressed a desire to truly be sisters again. I was still cautious, but I began to consider the possibility of forgiving Sarah and rebuilding some kind of relationship. The idea of the children growing up with some semblance of family normalcy started to feel more important than holding on to past grudges. My voice trembled as I told Sarah I'd think about it, acknowledging that it wouldn't be easy, considering everything that had happened. Sarah responded that she understood, not expecting everything to change overnight. She placed her hand on mine, saying she was ready to try if I was. The rest of that day was filled with lighter conversation, childhood memories, and even a few embarrassed laughs. I felt a complex mix of emotions, caution, hope, and a hint of cautious optimism. I managed to get permission from my boss to work remotely, extending my stay in my hometown. My time was split between remote work and cautious interactions with family, especially Sarah and the children. Though my relationship with Sarah had softened, I often found myself staring at my sister, overwhelmed by memories of the past. I watched her playing with Carol and Ryan in the garden and wondered how I could ever trust her again. The financial demands of the family began to weigh heavily on me. Sarah, still reeling from Stephen's loss, frequently asked for money for the kids and household expenses. She'd avoid my eyes as she explained how difficult things were, how Stephen had left a mountain of debt. I understood Sarah's situation, but I felt increasingly pressured. I wanted to help, mainly for the children's sake, but I couldn't help wondering where this would end. My parents, too, seemed to expect me to take a more active role in supporting my sister. I remember my father commenting one evening over dinner that I was so successful. Helping my sister a little wouldn't hurt me. I tried to keep my composure as I responded, explaining that I was helping, but I had my own responsibilities too. My mother, always the peacemaker, chimed in, asking what responsibilities a single woman without children could possibly have. She reminded me that Sarah was going through a tough time, having lost her husband. With each request for help, I felt more torn. I questioned whether my family really needed the help or if they were just taking advantage of my goodwill. Am I being used? I asked myself, my heart heavy with doubt. Despite my doubts, I continued to help, mainly for Carol and Ryan's sake. I didn't want the children to suffer any more than necessary. But as the days passed, I felt the line between helping and being exploited becoming increasingly blurred. As days turned into weeks, the dynamics in my parents' house focused more and more on me taking on responsibilities. Sarah couldn't maintain the apartment she had been living in and ended up moving in with the kids to our parents' house, complicating the situation further. I was so caught up in my desire to help, especially the children, that I didn't fully realize how much I was being taken advantage of. The bills seemed to multiply daily, and I was often relied upon to cover them. My mother would ask me to help with the electricity bill, using a tone that made it hard for me to refuse. I felt the weight of these requests, but chalked it up to the family's difficult circumstances. This is temporary, I told myself, trying to ignore the growing unease within me. It's just until things stabilize. Meanwhile, Sarah was becoming increasingly dependent on me. She casually commented that I wouldn't mind as she asked for another transfer to cover the kids' school expenses. Her nonchalance felt like a dagger to my heart, twisting with each request. One afternoon, as I was taking out the trash, I noticed a man working in the neighbor's yard. He was tall, with brown hair a bit disheveled from outdoor work. When he noticed me, he paused and approached with a friendly smile. He introduced himself as Justin, extending his hand and mentioning that I was Nancy, the daughter who had recently returned. I was surprised he knew my name and couldn't help but smile as I shook his hand. Justin pointed to his house, explaining he lived right next door. He offered his condolences for my brother-in-law, my sister's husband. His words brought a bitter taste to my mouth, reminding me of all the circumstances that had led me here. I forced a smile and thanked him, admitting it had been a complicated time. Justin tried to keep the conversation light, asking if I had any acquaintances here and acknowledging how difficult it must be to readjust after being away for so long. I explained that I hadn't been out much since returning, working remotely and managing many responsibilities at home. There was a strange comfort in talking to Justin. He mentioned that he also worked remotely and offered to show me around the neighborhood, grab coffee, or just get out for a bit if I needed a break. His encouraging smile was like a breath of fresh air in the stifling atmosphere I had been living in. I found myself smiling at the idea, genuinely attracted to the prospect. I thanked Justin, telling him I might take him up on that coffee invitation someday. As Justin said goodbye and returned to his yard, I went back inside, my mind lingering on his invitation. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine a life beyond the walls of my family home, a respite from the suffocating family dynamics. However, the weight of family responsibilities continued to grow heavier. Sarah and the kids were now permanent residents in my parents' house, and each day seemed to bring new expenses and needs. Reluctantly, I found myself increasingly entangled in the household demands, paying bills and covering various necessities. One morning, as I was preparing coffee, I overheard my parents talking in the living room. My father was complaining about the rising household bills, and my mother sighed in response, saying that at least they had me, with my good job and lack of other responsibilities. Hearing those words made a mix of frustration and sadness wash over me. I questioned whether my family truly understood the burden I was carrying. Feeling like the family bank, I stepped out onto the terrace, trying to escape the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. The fresh air hit my face, a stark contrast to the stuffy atmosphere of the house. As I sat there, I noticed Justin passing by. He spotted me and approached with that friendly smile of his, asking how I was doing. I was surprised but secretly relieved for the interruption. I forced a smile, telling him I was fine, just a bit overwhelmed with work and other things. Justin, bless his heart, suggested I come over to his place for coffee, saying a change of scenery might do me good. I hesitated for a moment, but then thought, why not? It sounded like a wonderful idea. Sitting in Justin's kitchen, sipping coffee, I felt myself relax for the first time in weeks. We chatted about music, movies, and life in general. Justin was a good listener, his calm demeanor putting me at ease. I found myself curious about his life, asking if he'd always lived here. He explained that he had moved here a few years ago and got a good deal on his house. Then he asked if I planned to stay after my family situation was sorted out. I sighed, admitting I hadn't decided yet. Everything felt complicated, like I was being pulled in a million different directions. Justin commented on how responsible and caring I'd always been toward my family. I agreed, but confessed that sometimes I wondered if they truly saw my efforts. He nodded understandingly, reminding me that while it's important to take care of others, it's equally important to take care of myself. He added that sometimes taking a step back and looking at things from the outside can make things clearer. Those words stuck with me. As I returned home, I began to question whether shouldering so much of the family's responsibilities was really the right thing to do. My conversation with Justin had opened a window in my mind, allowing me to see my situation in a new light. I found myself wanting to see him more often. Before I knew it, I was occasionally going out with Justin, a stark change from my previous constant availability for my family's needs. One afternoon, while I was in the kitchen, Sarah and my mother came in with a shopping list. My mother asked if I could go to the market for chicken and other necessities for dinner. Sarah chimed in, reminding me not to forget dessert, as the kids always looked forward to it. I hesitated, remembering I had already made plans with Justin for that evening. Taking a deep breath, I told them I had plans to go out with Justin, suggesting they could go to the market themselves or ask Dad to go with them. The disapproval on my mother's face was clear as day. She frowned, her voice dripping with judgment as she commented on how much time I'd been spending with Justin lately. My father, overhearing the conversation, entered the kitchen. His words hit me like a hammer. He said they were relying on me, and this wasn't the time to be distracted by neighbors. Frustration bubbled up inside me, hot and insistent. I reminded them that I had a life too, that I couldn't always be available for household matters. The silence that followed was thick with tension. You could have cut it with a knife. My mother sighed, her words a thinly veiled guilt trip about not wanting me to forget my family. She suggested this new friendship might be pulling me away from them. The accusation in her voice was clear as she pointed out I was choosing dinner with a stranger over family. Their eyes, full of reproach, bored into me like lasers. Later that evening, I found myself at dinner with Justin, feeling a strange comfort in sharing my situation with him. His eyes lit up as he suggested we take a trip, maybe to the beach or exploring that mountain trail I'd mentioned wanting to see. He insisted I needed a real break, away from everything. I couldn't help but smile at the idea. It sounded like a dream. I could almost feel the sea breeze on my face or imagine the crunch of leaves under my feet on a mountain path. Justin continued, painting a vivid picture of renting a small cabin, hiking, and trying local cuisine. As he spoke, I found myself getting lost in the fantasy of the trip. But suddenly, reality came crashing down like a bucket of cold water. I interrupted him, saying I wasn't sure I could afford a trip right now. The surprise on Justin's face was palpable. He reminded me that we both had good jobs and no children, wondering where my money was going. I hesitated, feeling a wave of discomfort wash over me. I explained that I'd been helping my family quite a bit, especially since Sarah and the kids moved in. Justin nodded, but I could see the concern etched on his face. He acknowledged my desire to help my family, but gently suggested I needed to think about myself too. His words hit home as he asked if I thought I was shouldering too much financial responsibility. I felt myself becoming defensive, like a turtle retreating into its shell. I found myself defending my actions to Justin, insisting they were my family, and I was just fulfilling my role. Justin's gentle response was like a warm breeze, reminding me not to forget about taking care of myself. He pointed out how easy it is to lose sight of how much we give and how little we receive. A moment of silence fell between us, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Then, with a smile that could melt butter, Justin offered to pay for the trip. I shook my head, feeling a mix of gratitude and discomfort. I told him I appreciated the offer, but I needed to solve this on my own. Justin's understanding nod was accompanied by an assurance that he was there for me, whatever I needed. As we parted ways, a thoughtful atmosphere lingered around us. On my way home, Justin's words played on repeat in my mind like a broken record. I found myself questioning his intentions. Was he just trying to help, or was he overstepping? That night, my head was a whirlwind of doubts and uncertainties. I tossed and turned, wondering if my family truly understood the sacrifices I was making. Was I being taken advantage of, or was I just being selfish? I woke up earlier than usual the next morning, last night's conversation still echoing in my thoughts. I tried to reassure myself that I was doing the right thing by helping my family. They needed me now, I told myself, ignoring the voice of doubt. As I was getting ready to start my day, I heard voices coming from the living room. My mother and Sarah were talking in hushed tones, their voices laced with urgency and concern. Curiosity mixed with a tinge of unease as I quietly moved closer to hear better. Sarah's anxious voice reached my ears first. She was telling Mom that if I continued seeing that neighbor, I might eventually leave them. My mother's calculated response sent chills down my spine. She agreed, saying they needed to keep me focused here with them. She mentioned how much of a financial help I had been. Sarah continued, suggesting they needed to make me feel needed and indispensable. She worried that if I started thinking too much about myself, their source of money might dry up. My mother's conspiratorial tone made my blood run cold as she suggested creating more financial emergencies to keep me hooked, all while they continued to save money. My heart started racing, and I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Their words cut like knives, revealing a truth I hadn't wanted to see. I had been manipulated and used by my own family. Sarah added, worry evident in her voice, that the more I got involved with Justin, the riskier it became for them. She feared he might plant ideas in my head, making me see the situation from a different angle. Trembling from this revelation, I quietly retreated, feeling a whirlwind of emotions, sadness, anger, and betrayal swirling inside me like a tempest. Justin's words echoed in my mind, and I realized with a heavy heart that he had been right all along. I was being exploited, my family interested only in what I could provide, not in my happiness. That day, I watched Carol and Ryan playing in the garden, their laughter and shouts filled with the innocence and joy unique to childhood. My chest tightened as I observed them, knowing I was about to make a decision that would forever change my relationship with them. I reflected on the painful, undeniable open wound of truth about Sarah's manipulation and my mother's complicity. Sarah will never change, I thought bitterly, and my mother will always protect her baby, her eternal child, no matter what happens. The pure smiles of my niece and nephew, oblivious to the adult's malice, struck a chord deep within my soul. I knew that by removing myself from this toxic environment, I would also be distancing myself from them. They're just innocent children in this situation, I thought, feeling a profound sadness wash over me. I approached them, crouching down next to Carol. "That's a beautiful drawing, Carol," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Carol looked up at me with a beaming smile that nearly broke my heart. She told me the drawing was for me because she wanted me to be happy. I hugged Carol tightly, fighting back tears that threatened to spill over. Then I turned to Ryan, who came running and threw his arms around me, his eyes sparkling as he asked if I would play with him too. "Of course, Ryan," I replied with a smile that barely masked my pain. As we played together, tears silently rolled down my cheeks. I knew I was quietly saying goodbye to them, a heart-wrenching decision, but a necessary one. I could no longer stay in that house, living in lies and being exploited by the very people I was supposed to love and protect. That night, after hours of soul-searching, I decided to call Justin. My heart pounded like a drum as the phone rang. When he answered, I took a deep breath before speaking. "Justin, can we talk?" I blurted out as soon as he picked up. His voice, tinged with concern, asked if something had happened. My voice trembled as I confessed that I had overheard a conversation between my mother and Sarah. They were plotting ways to extract more money from me, and I couldn't bear to stay in that house for another day after learning this. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, and then Justin's voice, filled with empathy, told me how sorry he was and that I didn't deserve such treatment. With a mix of hope and desperation, I asked if his offer for a trip was still valid. I told him I wanted to accept it if it was, but I insisted on repaying him in full. I suggested we could leave early the next morning since we could both work remotely. I needed to get out of there. Justin's response was like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. He assured me he was on my side and would go wherever I wanted to go. He told me not to worry about the cost, emphasizing that the most important thing was for me to have space to breathe and recover. As we made our travel plans, I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. The next morning, I would be leaving my family home with just one suitcase and a heart full of hope and uncertainty. That night, I left a letter for my family on the kitchen table. It was a quiet goodbye, expressing my love for my niece and nephew and the pain of my mother's and sister's betrayal. Tears stained the paper as I finished writing and packed my bags. The next morning, Justin and I set off. Our journey was a symbol of new beginnings, an act of liberation from the chains of my past. We chose a quiet destination, a place where I could find peace and introspection. During the trip, I allowed myself to enjoy Justin's companionship and the beauty around us. We explored landscapes, shared laughter, and created memories that would become the foundation of a new chapter in our lives. One night, looking up at the stars, I asked Justin if he thought I was doing the right thing. His response, as he lovingly squeezed my hand, was that I was doing what I needed to do for myself, and that was what mattered most. The trip with Justin turned out to be more than I could have imagined. We went to a quiet coastal town with golden sand beaches and a warm, gentle sea. During the day, we explored the natural beauty, took long walks, and savored local cuisine. At night, we shared deep conversations and laughter while watching the sunset. I had never felt so free in my life. As the days passed, I discovered more about myself, uncovering parts of me that I had forgotten or never known existed. Justin was a wonderful companion, caring, understanding, and always trying to make me smile. It was during a calm dinner, with the soft sound of waves in the background, that I realized how much I had fallen in love with Justin. He held my hand across the table and told me he never thought he'd meet someone like me and that these past few days had been special. I looked into his eyes and saw a reflection of my own feelings. I told him I felt the same way, that he had brought light into my life when I needed it most. I knew the time had come to make a decisive decision about my future. My heart was racing as I asked Justin if he'd consider coming back with me to my home in the big city. Justin's loving smile warmed me as he said he'd go anywhere with me. He promised to be with me within a month after making arrangements to rent out his house. True to his word, Justin moved in with me less than a month later, having already prepared everything for the transition. Justin was a wonderful husband, always supporting my decisions and wishes. He became my anchor, constantly reminding me that I didn't need to be manipulated or exploited by anyone. Together, we built a life based on mutual respect and love. The first few years without contact with my family were challenging for me. The absence of my niece and nephew weighed heavily on my heart. However, as time passed, I recognized that cutting ties was the healthiest decision I could have made for my own well-being. After settling together in the big city, Justin and I began to build a new life filled with love and understanding. Our bond grew stronger each day, rooted in trust and mutual support. As time went on, the idea of having a family naturally began to surface in our conversations. One day, sitting together in a local cafe and watching people pass by, I broached the subject with a hint of hesitation in my voice. I asked Justin if he'd ever thought about having children. Justin's eyes filled with affection as they met mine. He admitted he had been thinking about it. He said he could imagine having a family with me and that he thought I'd make a wonderful mother. I felt a wave of emotion wash over me as I smiled, admitting that, given my family situation, I'd always been scared to think about it. But with him, I felt we could create something different, something of our own. So, we decided to embark on this new adventure together. When Louis was born, he brought a new light into our lives. After experiencing so much pain and disappointment, I found a source of joy and hope in our son. With Justin by my side, I felt stronger and more complete than ever before. Years later, Justin and I were raising Louis in a home filled with love and joy. One afternoon, as I was looking through an old photo album, Louis approached me with childlike curiosity in his eyes. He pointed to an old photo of me and Sarah and asked if I had a sister. I slowly closed the album, looking at my son with a mixture of sadness and love. I told him no, that she had passed away a long time ago. I knew the answer wasn't literally true, but to me, the sister I once knew and loved had vanished, replaced by a stranger I could no longer recognize. I looked up and saw Justin lovingly preparing something in the kitchen. With him, I had found a new home and new family. Love, honesty, and support were the foundations of everything we had built together. In that moment, despite all the pain and loss I had experienced, I realized I had found my true place in the world with Justin and Louis by my side. I felt complete.